from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on Ag Day, tariffs or a trade war, the latest between the U.S. and China. In AgriBusiness, learning from last week.
And it was just a rough start. You know, we had red all across the screen. It didn't matter what you're looking at. Commodities got beat up pretty heavily on last Monday. And
Machinery Pete reverses course. And could this be the next big Olympic sport?
Ag Day, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
I'm scared to death.
Sentiments felt by many farmers in this country, uncertain as to how a trade war with China would rock the agricultural sector with falling prices and an unclear demand picture. Good morning. I'm Clinton Griffiths. Commodity traders and farmers will be watching the market this morning to see how soybeans and hog futures respond to Friday's drop-off. Those ag markets were lower after China slapped reciprocal tariffs on $3 billion in U.S. imports.
I think we've been getting taken advantage of, but they've been buying a lot of beans and it helps, and I'm very concerned about that. We'll just have to wait and see what we got.
As of late last week, China put 128 items on a hit list of U.S. products it intends to target with retaliatory tariffs. That list hit several farm products, pork in particular. China plans to assess a 25% tax on U.S. pork shipped into that country. China is the world's largest pork producer. It's also the biggest consumer, and it's the #2 buyer of U.S. pork. Other products include fresh and dried fruits, almonds, and steel products, but the list does not include soybeans. The U.S. ships $14 billion worth of soybeans to China each year. Traders and analysts fear that commodity could be targeted next. The industry reacting to the news. The National Pork Producers Council saying, quote, higher tariffs on our exports going there will harm our producers and undermine the rural economy, end quote. One of the more interesting aspects of this tariff action involves a Chinese-owned pork producer here in the United States. Smithfield Foods, based in Virginia, was purchased by China's WH Group in 2013. It's China's largest meat producer, which begs the question, will that Chinese-owned company be required to pay those tariffs? We turn to Betsy Gibbon for some answers.
Clinton, there is a lot of trade uncertainty with China's news of planning on retaliation. Hog market futures shooting down in the red Friday. In addition, shares of Hong Kong-based WH Group Limited plunging on Friday as well due to its sister company it acquired, Smithfield, which is the world's largest pork producer with locations in the U.S. Kearns & Associates economist Steve Meyer saying it does not look as if Smithfield is excluded from the potential tariff threat just yet, even though it's a Chinese company. But Meyer saying while the tariff impact is unknown at this time, there may be some exceptions with Hong Kong.
More than half of the pork variety meats that went to China and Hong Kong total went through Hong Kong last year. We've had some anecdotal evidence from some sources that said that maybe Hong Kong wouldn't even be included in this tariff. And if that's the case, then the back door would stay open, and it all depends on how tough the Chinese want to get with product flowing from Hong Kong.
Meyer saying U.S. pork variety meat could have the biggest impact if the tariff threat becomes a reality. U.S. Meat Export Federation saying China was the U.S.'s largest destination in both volume and value for variety meat exports in 2017. China accounted for more than 1/3 of U.S. pork variety meat exports last year. Meyer believes a trade disruption with Mexico, who was one of the U.S.'s NAFTA partners, would cause more damage than if China taxed tariffs on U.S. pork.
The WH Group, then known as Shengwei Group, paid $4.7 billion for Smithfield. At that time, it was the largest Chinese acquisition of an American company. Also last week, the administration exempting the EU and 4 other allies from steel and aluminum tariffs. President Trump making it official late Thursday night by issuing a proclamation saying the tariffs would be delayed for the EU, Australia, Argentina, Brazil, and South Korea. Those allies have until May 1st to give Robert Lighthizer, the USTR, time to negotiate agreements with each trading partner to address U.S. national security concerns. The proclamation also covers Mexico and Canada, which Trump previously said would be exempt. Meanwhile, President Trump says the U.S. and South Korea are close to finishing a renegotiated trade deal. The president briefing reporters Friday that he hopes to make an announcement this week. The president called KORUS, which was negotiated by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, a, quote, horrible deal. The president made the comments during an event where he signed the omnibus spending bill. There was drama Friday as the president tweeted out that he considered vetoing the funding plan, but in the end, he signed the $1.3 trillion measure. Now, the president was upset the package does not include protections for dreamer immigrants and doesn't provide enough money for his promised border wall. The bill includes changes to the 199A tax provision, also called the grain glitch fix. The previous version benefited grain sales to co-ops over private grain elevators. Following the debate on a spending bill, it now remains whether any other legislation can be completed before elections in November. That includes a farm bill, where in the House, bipartisanship continues to deteriorate. The House Ag Committee already at an impasse on the legislation over disagreements to changes in the nutrition portion of the bill. Chairman Mike Conaway now saying he may pass the farm bill on a party line vote. Ranking member Colin Peterson says it appears we're now talking about a farm bill extension in 2018. Let's take a quick break from Washington News and see what Mike Hoffman is finding for us on the farm for crop comments. Mike?
Good morning, Clinton. We're starting off this Monday morning in Tumbleton, Alabama, where Plant 2018 has begun. Jason Burke saying he's planting the first of his cornfields. He says the soil temperature is perfect. In fact, planting conditions are just right. In Burt County, Nebraska, Matt Nelson says the snow is gone finally. It's a beautiful spring day and a wonderful sunset. That is a pretty one. Now, taking a look at the estimated rainfall last week, this goes from the previous Saturday through this past Friday. You can see a strip from Kansas into the mid-Atlantic states, but a lot of what we're seeing is, or some of the heaviest areas there, eastern panhandle and northern portions of Florida, ending up with some big weather and also some severe weather to go along with that. We'll check out your forecast for the week. First, here are some hometown temps.
Ever wake up wondering what does today's weather have in store? Well, with weather updates, it delivers the local forecast right to your cell phone each morning to make preparing for the day easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
When we come back, we'll get you started for the week ahead, and it looks to be a busy one. Analysis is next, and later, Machinery Pete.
Sometimes we talk record high auction prices. Today, we're going to talk lowest auction prices.
Plus, grab your axe. It's time for a night on the town. The latest craze today on In the Country.
With a uniquely powerful formulation of proven ingredients, Resicor Corn Herbicide gives you extraordinary power.
Who wants dessert?
At least when it comes to weeds.
AgriBusiness commodity markets feeling the weight of trade issues. Let's see where things settled on Friday on the floor this evening in Chicago.
Soybeans were lowered. That China trade wars really were pressuring the futures right out of the box, really pressing it down. There has been some recovery as the markets started to move through the day, but all that being said, it's still dry in Argentina. So that kind of news at some point is going to start to kick in, and we start to really see what the damage is down there. That should help our markets. Corn was also easier. That big slide early recovered actually quicker than the soybeans did, and it seems like this wild volatility is really distracting the technical numbers because on the futures, because it seems that even though that we're in a little bit of a minor trend on the downside, these weekly exports for corn remain actually very bullish. That's all from the floor at the CME Group. Here in Chicago, I'm Virginia McGathy.
Here at the AgriBusiness Desk, we have Brian Doherty, Matt Bennett. Thank you both for being here. All right, let's look at the week that was last week. Plenty going on. What did you learn last week? What are you taking away as we move forward into 2018? Matt, we'll start with you.
Well, I think one thing that we learned last week, obviously you come into the week and it was just a rough start. You know, we had red all across the screen. It didn't matter what you're looking at. Commodities got beat up pretty heavily on last Monday. And the rest of the week, it just seemed like we couldn't really get off the mat. You know, and then we come into the end of the week. Overnight markets there on Thursday night were ugly as could be once we started talking about some of the tariff situation with China. But actually the markets performed admirably going into the weekend and tried to recuperate some of the losses. I think there's still a lot of folks looking at the acreage report, which we can talk about here in a little bit, but it's part of the reason why I don't think people want to push the downside too far.
Yeah, what do you think, Brian? What did you learn?
Yeah, a couple things. As Matt said, we got off to a rough start last week. In part, though, to be informed, the fund money, managed money, was strongly long beans and corn. That leaves the market vulnerable to a break. So, you know, recognize that when those positions really start to build up and get toward historic levels, the market needs something to feed it to keep going, and consequently it's easy for prices to break, and that's probably what we saw. The other thing learned last week too is that farmers are holding a lot of inventory, so when we do get rallies, they're selling. We're seeing the non-commercials really aggressively sell last week, which meant they were buying a lot of grain.
All right, so real quick, what are you going to watch for key for this week?
Obviously, the acreage report coming up, there's a lot of different crops vying for a few more acres. Are we going to see a sub 90 or a sub 89 on corn? If we do, long term, that's a pretty friendly thing for me, especially if we have any sort of summer weather. How high is the bean number going to be? Is it going to be 91? Is it going to be 92? Obviously, there's some implications that come along with that, too.
Yeah, what do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I agree with Matt that we got this huge report coming out, so that'll be the big news event for the week, most likely, unless it's something with tariff beyond what we know now, or the budget. But so it's not so much, you know, what that's going to say, it's how do we prepare in case whatever it does say. So I have a general guess it'll probably say or confirm big bean acres. What does that mean to the market, and what does that mean to you as a farmer? So think about prior to the report how you want to be positioned to manage that volatility.
All right, start digesting some of this stuff, putting the pieces together. Thank you both for being here. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a couple minutes.
For advice on the best way to be profitable on your farm, contact Matt at 217-273-1133. To discuss marketing strategies, call 800-334-9779 or visit stewartpeterson.com.
Welcome back to Ag Day on this Monday morning with Mike Hoffman looking at the drought monitor. And Mike, there are some places getting better, particularly out on the West Coast.
Yeah, California's improved over the past few weeks, and much of the southern Mississippi Valley, but not so much right there in the middle of the country. Texas, Oklahoma, Panhandle, southwestern Kansas. And that area obviously extends back into the Four Corner region, much of Arizona, New Mexico, and southern Colorado, and much of Utah. Still very, very dry. There's also dry spots in southeastern Georgia and parts of the western Dakotas, northeastern Montana. Still dry, but that's a lot better than you folks were a year ago. Let's go back a month, and you can see how the areas have been getting better through the east central plains anyway, middle Mississippi Valley. Those areas have definitely improved, but it has gotten worse right there in the bullseye area from the Texas Panhandle into southwestern Kansas. There's the jet stream as we start the week. We've been in this pattern with a trough off the east coast, trough in the west, and occasionally we get a ridge that warms things up in the Midwest, but it hasn't been a lot this year. But as we put the maps into motion, we're kind of seeing something evolving here, a little bit of a cutoff there in the far southwest, trough just through the middle of the country as we head through the middle of this week. And then as we head through the end of the week, the trough tries to redevelop in the eastern portions of the country, but there's no trough out west. So this is a total change in what the pattern has been over the past month, month and a half. What this transition leads to is still a big question mark, but at least by early next week, we are looking at a trough in the east, especially the Great Lakes, and a ridge in the west. That will change things. Temperatures this week, that's why I'm going above normal for a change in the far west. Below normal east of the Rockies, right down through the central and northern plain states. Mostly normal east of there, although eastern Maine northeastward probably above normal. Precipitation for the coming week, we're looking at a couple of storm systems kind of moving east to west or west to east, and a lot of moisture coming up out of the Gulf. So the Gulf of Mexico up to the Great Lakes through the northeast above normal. Below normal for much of Florida, most of the southwest, and most of the far northern plains. 30-day outlook for temperatures below normal for the northern plains all the way down to Illinois, Indiana, Great Lakes northeast, above normal Gulf Coast and most of the southwest. Precipitation over the next month, below normal in the southeast, southwest, above normal northeast Montana and those areas in the drought right now, and also above normal Gulf Coast all the way to the Great Lakes. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, we'll head to Bakersfield, California. Partly sunny and pleasant today. High temperature around 60 degrees. Huron, South Dakota, cloudy, a shower or two possible with a high of 41. And Knoxville, Tennessee, times of clouds and sunshine, high around 60.
Up next, Machinery Pete goes low, as in the lowest prices he's seeing on certain equipment. Insight you won't want to miss, of course. And later, leave the bowling ball in the closet, keep the golf clubs in storage, but grab your axe for a pastime on the rise.
AgDay, brought to you by new Delaro fungicide for corn and soybeans. Achieve personal best yields.
Machinery Pete talks a lot about the highest prices he's seen on used equipment. Well, today he takes the opposite approach. Greg?
No, folks, I don't sit around the office and just worry about record high auction prices. I know it can seem that way sometimes, but really for 28 plus years, my thing is just we want to compile as much data as we can, regardless of condition and price, and paint an accurate picture on what's happening with used values. Now let's take a very specific example. Let's look at just 2010 model John Deere 8320R tractors. And yes, I have seen some sold very high recently. Here's a picture of one, again a 2010 model, 1,273 hours on it, sold December 6th on a farm auction in Northeast Missouri for $195,000. Now that's a very strong price on a 2010 model. But if we pull back, the average auction price on the last 12 2010 models that we've seen is way lower. It's $122,250. In fact, here's a look at the 5 lowest auction prices on 2010 John Deere 8320R tractors I've seen in the last 15 months. And you can see down as low as $80,000 on a consignment auction in Central California, February 2017. Did have 7,835 hours on it. Now, really interesting right now, folks, again, the good condition stuff, like I say, has been selling well on farm auctions going back to November, but just the last 10 days, we have started to see some softening prices on wholesale auctions around the country, and the average condition stuff also sliding. That's going to be really interesting, especially now, given we're tiptoeing towards potential trade wars with China. You know, what effect could this have on used farm equipment values?
All right, thanks, Greg. Well, up next, another numbers game you might enjoy, only this one involving an axe and a pint of beer. Details next.
AgDay, brought to you by Prosaro fungicide from Bayer. In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
Believe it or don't, axe throwing is quickly becoming a popular sport at bars across North America. Enthusiasts are starting leagues, and some have thousands of members. There's even hope to one day bring the sport to the Olympic Games. Robert Bumstead reports.
Talking of timber, look at this.
From lumberjack rough to hipster chic, the sport of axe throwing is becoming popular in bars across the country.
People are like, oh my God, sharp objects and beer. What a great idea that is. But truthfully, after you have a couple of drinks, you start to actually throw a little bit better.
Kick Axe Throwing in Brooklyn's up-and-coming Gowanus neighborhood is the first such venue to open in New York City.
You're hanging out with, like, you know, the hip youth of Brooklyn, throwing sharp objects at a board.
Expert Alexander Stein,
boom,
teaches beginners the proper technique.
Cross your thumbs like such. This is going to keep the axe, so it doesn't go all wobbly when it leaves your grip. Next, you're going to place it right out in front of you, pointing that at what you want to hit. Release about forehead height after bringing it all the way back. No, okay.
On this Thursday night, Kick Axe was packed with groups of friends and companies out for a team-building exercise.
It was actually a very safe take on a classic game, throwing sharp things at stationary walls.
Kick Axe is just one of dozens of similar venues that have popped up in recent years. It's a casual night out for some, but for others, this is serious competition.
Axe throwing is very cathartic.
It's definitely a good way to release some energy after a long day at work.
It's championship night at Bad Axe Throwing in Chicago for members of the World Axe Throwing League.
10 throws around, winner take all.
This Canada-based chain of venues started the World Axe Throwing League a year ago, and it already has 2,500 members.
We have people who are 18 years old in the league. We have people up in their 70s in the league. All sorts of different professions.
In December, they even held the first World Championship tournament, played virtually and broadcast on Facebook. The grand prize, $3,500 and bragging rights as the first world champion. Enthusiasts say the ultimate goal is to make axe throwing an Olympic sport.
It's very competitive, takes skill.
This should absolutely be an Olympic sport. If curling is, then this should be too.
Robert Bumstead, Associated Press.
And That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. For Mike Hoffman and all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.
AgDay, brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest lasting heavy-duty pickups.